The Bengal Files, Truth That History Chose to Bury, written by Dr. Jaiji Bansal. The Bengal Files resurrects the forgotten horror of Noakhali 1946 and exposes the enduring persecution of Hindus across Bengal, demanding remembrance, resistance, and moral reckoning. Last week, I attended the first U.S. pre-screening of Vivek Agnihotri's much-anticipated film The Bengal Files in New Jersey. The hall was packed, yet heavy with silence as the final scenes unfolded. This was not just another film screening. It felt like a moment of reckoning. Agnihotri's latest work is not merely cinema. It is a demand for remembrance, a resurrection of truths long buried. The Bengal Files marks the third and most ambitious installment in Vivek Agnihotри's acclaimed Files trilogy. While the Tashkent Files delved into the mysterious death of Lal Bahadur Shastri, and the Kashmir Files exposed the long-suppressed tragedy of the Kashmiri Hindu exodus, the Bengal Files takes viewers even further back, to the forgotten horror of the Noakhali genocide of 1946 and the persistent persecution of Hindus in Bengal. Each film in the trilogy confronts an uncomfortable chapter in Indian history that mainstream discourse has often ignored or whitewashed. This is not entertainment, Agnihotri insists. This will haunt you, he warns. The film is an act of civilizational resistance, a cinematic attempt to shake a society from its stupor and compel it to remember. A civilization forgotten for many Indians, the idea that Hindu civilization has endured centuries of systemic persecution is unfamiliar. Textbooks focus on the glories of empires or the evils of colonialism, but skip over how large segments of the native population were subjugated, converted, or displaced. This gap is not incidental. It is ideological. Independent India inherited a secular framework that, while noble in intent, often rendered Hindu suffering politically inconvenient. In the dominant narrative, Hindus are cast as the privileged majority, not as victims. Speaking of their persecution risks upsetting the binary through which many intellectual and global institutions interpret South Asian politics, the Hindu as hegemon, the Muslim as oppressed. But this framework collapses in the face of history. Direct Action Day, a bloodstained prelude. The story begins not with partition in 1947, but with the events of August 16, 1946, a date etched in blood. Known as Direct Action Day, it was called by the Muslim League to demand the creation of Pakistan. In Kolkata, the call morphed into a massacre. Mobs incited by violent rhetoric swept through Hindu neighborhoods. Eyewitnesses recalled that law enforcement, under the premiership of Hussain Shahid Shirwadi, stood down. Hindu officers were transferred ahead of the violence. In just 48 hours, over 40,000 Hindus were slaughtered. Homes were torched, women violated, entire families erased. This was not spontaneous mob violence. It was a calculated, state-enabled massacre. American photojournalist Margaret Burke White, then in India, captured the aftermath. Her images, bones scattered in gutters, vultures picking at corpses, were published in Time and the New York Times. And yet, most Indian students will never see these photographs. Few even know the name Direct Action Day. Noakhali, Bengal's Holocaust. If Direct Action Day was the spark, Noakhali was the inferno that followed. Located in present-day Bangladesh, the region witnessed a campaign of ethnic cleansing between October and December 1946. Entire Hindu villages were razed. Men were hacked to death with machetes. Women were gang-raped, paraded naked, and forcibly converted. Families were burned alive in locked huts. Survivors walked for days through hostile terrain, hoping to find safety that rarely arrived. Mahatma Gandhi, who visited Noakhali in an effort to restore peace, described the violence as shameful beyond words. He reportedly told survivors, "I see no way out for the Hindus except to leave Noakhali or perish." According to the UN Genocide Convention, genocide includes acts aimed at destroying a group through mass killings, cultural destruction, and forced displacement. Noakhali meets every one of these criteria. But unlike other genocides that entered global consciousness, this one faded from memory, buried under layers of political caution and national discomfort. The unfinished project partition is often seen as the bloody conclusion to British colonialism. But for the Muslim League, it was only a milestone. The phrase unfinished project was used by leaders who saw the division of India not as a final solution, but as the beginning of a broader civilizational shift. This vision continues to echo in present-day Bangladesh. Born in 1971 as a secular republic that rejected Pakistani theocracy, the country has since undergone a steady transformation. Once celebrated for its Bengali syncretism, it has embraced an increasingly rigid Islamic identity. In 1947, Hindus made up nearly a quarter of East Pakistan's population. Today, they account for less than 7%. Over 50 million Hindus are missing from demographic records, their disappearance attributed to targeted violence, institutional bias, forced conversions, and coerced migration. Even legislation has been weaponized. Bangladesh's Vested Property Act, formerly the Enemy Property Act, has been used to dispossess Hindu families of ancestral homes. In India, similar dynamics are playing out through bureaucratic neglect and selective enforcement of the law. If the current trend persists, demographers warn that Bangladesh may become entirely Hindu-free by 2050. West Bengal, a quiet crisis across the border. In the Indian state of West Bengal, a quieter but equally disturbing trend is underway. Districts like Murshidabad, Malda, and Cooch Behar are experiencing demographic and ideological shifts reminiscent of pre-insurgency Kashmir. In many villages, Hindu families have begun sending their daughters away for safety. Land grabs, often facilitated by corrupt political networks, target Hindu-owned properties. Temples are vandalized and cultural intimidation is on the rise. Illegal immigration from Bangladesh continues, lubricated by vote bank politics that prioritize short-term gains over long-term security. What's happening in West Bengal is not random. It follows a pattern: state-enabled migration, targeted violence during elections, legal harassment of Hindus, temple desecration, cultural marginalization left unchecked. These patterns threaten to turn West Bengal into the next Kashmir, one where history may once again be repeated under the veil of silence. The silence is the scandal as these changes unfold on the ground. One might expect institutions to sound the alarm. Yet, the guardians of justice remain conspicuously quiet. Despite these warning signs, the response from national and global institutions remains tepid. Indian media rarely addresses the issue, preferring safer narratives. Academic circles that champion minority rights show little interest in Hindu persecution. The international human rights community, often vocal about religious freedom, has remained conspicuously silent. Even Bollywood, which produces thousands of films each year, has shown little interest in dramatizing the traumas faced by Hindus. Love stories, thrillers, and biopics dominate screens, but not films about Direct Action Day or Noakhali. This omission is not apolitical. It reflects a cultural discomfort with challenging, entrenched narratives. Cinema as civilizational memory in this vacuum. The Bengal Files emerges not just as cinema, but as civilizational testimony. Its goal is not to entertain, but to awaken. Just as Holocaust cinema preserved the memory of Jewish suffering, the Bengal Files aims to ensure that Hindu pain is neither denied nor forgotten. The decision to premiere the film in the United States, in 10 major cities, before releasing it in India, is strategic. It seeks to engage the Indian diaspora, particularly younger generations who may be disconnected from their ancestral roots. As one promotional tagline says, "Memory is survival." The hope is that Hindu youth, like their Jewish counterparts, will grow up not in bitterness but in awareness. That they will carry history not as a burden, but as a shield. A sacred responsibility. The filmmaker behind the Bengal Files has faced multiple threats and legal challenges. Furs have been filed against him in West Bengal. Elements in Bangladesh have issued veiled warnings. But he remains resolute. He calls his work an act of Dharma, a sacred obligation to truth. The question he leaves hanging is stark. If this story remains untold, who will bear witness? A gathering storm. While much of the current crisis stems from internal political miscalculations, a larger geopolitical alignment is also taking shape. Pakistan, Bangladesh, and China, three countries with authoritarian tendencies, have begun coordinating diplomatically and strategically. Recent high-level meetings between these states point toward a convergence of interests, with India's eastern frontier as the focal point. Bengal, with its porous borders and political fragility, is seen as a soft target. The danger is not just physical, it is ideological. Vote bank politics, legal appeasement, and intellectual cowardice have combined to create an environment where radicalism festers unchecked. Those who raise concerns are branded bigots or dismissed as alarmists. But ignoring fire doesn't stop the burn. Memory as resistance to the Bengal Files does not offer a solution. It offers remembrance. And in that act of remembering, it offers resistance. Civilizations that forget their pain, history teaches us, are doomed to repeat it. The silence around Hindu persecution is not just a historical oversight. It is an ongoing moral failure. To remember is not to hate. It is to honor, to protect, to survive. In a world where truth is often inconvenient, memory itself becomes a radical act. The Bengal Files is that act, a mirror held up not just to history, but to conscience, and perhaps to the soul of a forgotten people.